Ever wish you had like a medical expert kind of looking over your doctor's shoulder, offering insights in real time? Well, today's deep dive takes a look at research from NYU Langone Health,
Mm.
and they might just be making that a reality.
hmm
They've created an AI system called NYUTron. They can analyze your doctor's notes, like those scribbles and dictations, and use that to predict things like if you might end up back in the hospital or even in hospital mortality.
It's really something, I mean, we're talking about AI that can work with the messy part of healthcare, not just neat and organized data.
Right.
NYUTron can actually decipher the language of healthcare, so that opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
We've got a stack of research papers here that go into detail about how they built and trained this AI. They even test it out in a real hospital setting, so we're going to look into how it performs compared to the traditional methods and even real doctors.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges in healthcare is that doctors are dealing with so much information. They have to make huge decisions really quickly, and traditional prediction models, well, they struggle to keep up because they rely on structured data, which is hard to integrate into a fast-paced clinical environment.
So it's like having a supercomputer trying to understand a conversation by only looking at keywords.
Exactly. But NYUtron changes that. It's a large language model, which means it's been trained on a massive amount of text data. In this case, 7.25 million clinical notes, totaling a mind-boggling 4.1 billion words.
Wow, that's more medical records than anyone could ever read in a lifetime.
Oh,
What's even more impressive is that this NYUtron isn't just a one-trick pony.
right.
They train it to tackle 5 key tasks.
Yeah, that's right. It can predict things like whether a patient might be readmitted within 30 days or whether they might unfortunately pass away during their stay.
Oh, wow.
It can also look at how severe their chronic illnesses are, predict how long their hospital stay might be, and even predict if their insurance might deny a claim.
Okay, so it's like this multi-tool for medical predictions.
Yeah.
But how accurate is it really?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. They use what's called area under the curve, or AUC, to measure accuracy. Think of it this way. The closer the AUC is to 1, the better the predictions.
So a perfect score would be 1.
Yes. And across all 5 tasks, NYUtron scored between 0.787 and 0.949 AUC, which is incredibly good.
Okay, but what does that actually mean for a real patient?
Let's take predicting in-hospital mortality as an example. NYUtron got an amazing 0.949 AUC for this task. To put it into perspective, imagine existing models are like those weather forecasts that get it right maybe 75% of the time.
Okay.
NYUtron is more like a forecast that's accurate 95% of the time.
That's a huge jump in accuracy, so it's not just about making predictions, but making much more reliable ones.
Exactly. And NYUtron often outperforms those traditional methods by a lot, especially when predicting in-hospital mortality, where it was over 7% better.
Wow, so we're talking about potentially saving lives here.
The potential is definitely there. Of course, this doesn't mean doctors should just blindly trust what the AI says, but it gives them another really powerful tool to use.
Speaking of doctors, how did NYUtron do when they put it head-to-head with real physicians? I mean, it's one thing to be good in theory, but can it keep up with human expertise?
They did just that. They compared NYUtron against 6 physicians in predicting readmission. And you know what? The AI held its own. It proved that it's not just some fancy algorithm. It actually did better at identifying patients who were likely to be readmitted while keeping the same rate of false positives as the doctors.
So it's like having another set of really sharp eyes.
It's more like giving doctors a powerful assistant that can process huge amounts of information and then offer those insights. This could be especially helpful in those busy hospitals where time is critical.
Yeah, for sure. So they actually used this AI with real patients.
They did. They took it a step further and implemented NYUtron in a real hospital for 4 months.
They just let this AI loose on real patients. What happened?
Yeah, the results were pretty promising. NYUtron correctly predicted 82.3% of actual readmissions. That's a pretty good hit rate. And the doctors who reviewed 100 of the AI's predictions found that many of them were not only accurate, but potentially preventable, which is key.
Yeah, it's one thing to say something's going to happen. It's another to actually be able to do something about it.
Right, exactly. The review also found that the patients who NYUtron flagged for readmission were a lot more likely to have serious consequences.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were 6 times more likely to die during their hospital stay, and on average, those stays were almost 3 days longer.
That means early intervention could be a game changer.
Absolutely. That's where the power of this AI really lies. It's not just about numbers, it's about potentially improving outcomes for real patients.
So let's go back to those 5 tests we talked about earlier.
Okay.
What about predicting in-hospital mortality? That just seems like a really tough thing to predict.
You're right. It's a sensitive and crucial prediction. And NYUTron did exceptionally well. It got a median AUC of 94.9% on that task.
So almost a perfect score. How does that stack up against what doctors can do?
Well, traditional prediction models use these established scoring systems like SAPS2 and Apache2.
Right.
They work okay, but NYUTron actually outperformed them by quite a bit. It was over 7% better.
Wow, so it's significantly more accurate than existing methods.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's where analyzing all those messy doctor's notes really pays off.
Exactly. Those traditional models just miss out on all that information.
Speaking of all that information, what about predicting the severity of those chronic illnesses? I remember my doctor mentioning something called the CCI, but I have no idea what that even...
Yeah, the CCI, or Charlson Comorbidity Index, is a way to measure how severe a patient's chronic illnesses are. And NYUTron was tasked with predicting it using only the information in the clinical notes. So no looking at the structured data that's usually used for that.
Oh, so it's like figuring out someone's whole medical history just by listening to them talk about their symptoms.
It's a tough challenge for sure, but NYUTron managed to do it. It got a median AUC of 89.4% on this task, which is really impressive considering it couldn't use that structured data.
So it's like a medical detective piecing clues together. I was also interested in how NYUTron was able to predict things like length of stay and insurance denials. That feels like more about the hospital's operations than patient care.
That's a good point. Hospitals aren't just about treating patients. They're also complex organizations that need to run efficiently. Predicting things like length of stay helps them manage resources better. For example, if they know a patient's likely to stay longer, they can prepare for that.
Yeah, it's all about keeping things running smoothly.
Exactly. And when it came to predicting length of stay, NYUTron really exceeded expectations. It got a median AUC of 78.7%, even beating out a traditional model based on Lisbon, Portugal features by a whole 12.3%.
Lisbon, Portugal features. Sounds kind of fancy. What are those?
Those are a set of variables that are commonly used to predict length of stay, things like the patient's demographics, their admission type, even their postal code.
So NYUTron did a better job just by looking at the doctor's notes.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
And then there's the whole issue of insurance claim denials, which are a huge headache for everyone involved. Patients get hit with surprise bills and hospitals lose revenue.
Yeah, nobody wants to deal with that kind of paperwork mess.
Well, NYUTron showed a lot of promise here. It had a median AUC of 87.2% for predicting denials and outperformed the traditional model by a whopping 14.7%.
So it's like having an AI insurance expert double-checking everything behind the scenes. That could save so much trouble.
Absolutely. The potential is huge. Imagine hospitals being able to catch those potential denial issues early on and then fix them before they become a problem. It could totally change how we manage healthcare administration.
So we've been talking about these 5 main tasks. But I'm curious, did they look into anything else with NYUTron?
They did. They explored a few other things, like how it works with different types of clinical notes, how it performs with different groups of patients, and even whether it could be used in different hospitals.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Okay.
So can NYUTron handle different kinds of clinical notes?
Right.
I mean, a patient's medical history isn't just one document.
You're right. And the researchers did look at that. It turns out NYUTron can work with more than just discharge summaries. They found it could also predict those insurance denials just as well using admission notes.
So it's flexible. It can look at different parts of the patient's story. What about different hospitals? Could you take this AI and just plug it into any hospital system?
They tested that too. They have a few different hospitals within the NYU Langone Health system and wanted to see how NYUTron would adapt to each one. They found the best way was to kind of give the AI a general medical education first by training it on data from all of the hospitals and then fine-tune it with data from each specific location.
So it's like letting it specialize after it gets the basics.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They tried this out using data from 2 hospitals that were pretty far apart, one in Manhattan and one in Brooklyn. Fine-tuning it with the local data really improved performance at both places.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Yeah.
It can be customized. That's important if you want to use it in more places.
Yeah.
But were there any limitations? I mean, no system's perfect, right?
Yeah, you're right about that. And they did find that NYUTron's performance could be a little different depending on a few things. For example, it did really well in the neurology department, like a 90.12% AUC. But in internal medicine, those AUCs were lower. They ranged from 67.95% for the non-oncology cases to 63.77% for the oncology specialties.
That's a pretty big difference. Why do you think that is?
It probably has to do with how complex those cases are. Internal medicine has a much wider range of conditions. They also saw that NYUTron's performance kind of went up and down over the months.
Really? Was there a pattern to it?
They noticed a dip in July, which they think might be because of the new doctors starting their residencies.
Oh, so the AI had to learn how to read the new doctor's handwriting or note-taking style.
Exactly. Every doctor does things a little differently. They also looked at differences based on the patient's age and found that the performance went down a bit as patients got older. Again, probably because older patients tend to have more complex cases.
That makes sense. So even with those variations, it sounds like NYUTron has the potential to really change healthcare.
It really does. It's pushing the boundaries of what we can do with AI in medicine and shows just how much valuable information is hidden in those clinical notes.
It's pretty exciting to think about a future where AI is working right alongside doctors, helping them make better decisions, and hopefully leading to better care for everyone.
It's not about replacing doctors. It's about giving them a new, powerful tool that can help them do even more.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this amazing world of medical AI, here's something to think about. If you knew your doctor had access to an AI like NYUTron, would you feel more confident in your care? It might be closer than we think.